Hey everyone, it's Raghu and I'm back with David Silver. I think he only needs one name. Dave, glad to have you back here.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thanks a lot.
Everybody, of course, I think many of you out there are pretty happy when David does come back because I know that he really connects with many of you. And for me, and I was thinking this before, Dave, not to do too much hyperbole.
Do it. I like it.
But the reality of the ease at which we can talk about stuff. And I'm not doing any kind of double thinking. How do I keep the conversation going if it gets a little bit stuck? All that stuff is non-existent. Yeah. And so I'm really happy you're here today. And I enlisted David because, starting from the big picture, which includes Love, Serve, Remember Foundation, we decided, there is so much anxiety out there, uncertainty, and many times depressed emotions around what's going on in our world. And I don't even think we have to, list all of the possibilities. I know we're a little... some of us are a little bit more enthused about the potential in terms of this election, but I say that no matter what, we are in such a divided state in this country. We have abused this earth so much over such a long time. We have such a divide with wealth and poverty, and we have a lot of stuff that we are all dealing with. And so we've dedicated certainly the next year, so all of the things that we do with Ram Dass and with our other close teachers, we've dedicated to addressing this anxiety, uncertainty, depression, whatever, the negative stuff that we are dealing with through books, through films, through courses, through retreats. So we have a constant theme going through over the next year. So I thought this is a good time to help kick it off with you, David. And so then I thought, okay, well, what are we bringing to the table? And, David and I have been, forever, we have been sharing different teachings from teachers that we really admire, that we have taken teachings from, not necessarily in person. And I just said to David just before we got on, gee, I look at all of the, excerpts I want to read from and the references I want to make. They're mostly Tibetan. And I think in my case, and I'll say it for you as well, there's just as a world view, a philosophy, a perspective from which I have a lot of trust about how they say and define reality. And and the other thing is, like with Neem Karoli Baba and Shirdi Sai Baba, who David has been close to for most of his life, they didn't teach. There's no books. There's books about them. So it's a little more difficult in one way. I mean, the teachings you receive through getting close to them, through books, or in my case, through actually being in front of him, is much more ineffable, shall we say? Although both of them said amazing things, one-liners mostly. So the Tibetans really filled a void. And back when I was with Maharaji, as you know, David, many of us somehow, we bumped into Buddhist practices, Vipassana, insight meditation, but many of us bumped into, or were bumped into by grace, really, incredible Tibetan teachers, from Kala Rinpoche to Karmapa, Dilgo Khyentse. In my case, I didn't see Dilgo Khyentse, and so on. But we've managed to just bring that all into our day-to-day lives for a long time, both David and I, and we want to share it. That is what this podcast is about.
Yeah, and before we did the podcast, we talked a little, as we usually do, about what we're going to do.
Mm.
And it's good that you're doing this thing with the foundation too, because one of the sort of sillier criticisms of spiritual and philosophically interested people is that they avoid or evade the reality that's around them that can be so dark. And I don't believe that to be true, incidentally, but it is a sort of cliche that there's kind of an escapism. And I've never believed that, and I don't believe it now. But I think it's nice to talk about how we, as individuals, Raghu and I, and anyone else we talk about, deal with it personally, and
Right.
see the other people, wise people, how they deal with it. And it's difficult to talk about because it's a fluctuating thing, even with an individual. In my case, I can say that sometimes I have such, I feel such power, and yet humility coming from the great masters and teachers that we've become involved with by grace, as you say.
Yeah.
But sometimes on a given day, for whatever reason, it might be something you see on the news, it might be something more personal, it might be just something that's been irking us for a long time. We can get very depressed
Say the
and
least.
lonely,
Yeah.
even if we have a partner, which we do, but just suddenly it comes upon you like, what kind of planet are we living on, and all this terrible stuff. And the only word that works for me is the word perspective, really. That we know it's bad. We know we can only help in the ways we can. But what we can do is adjust our our internal behavior and inner behavior in order to be able to deal with it and be helpful to others and, of course, ourselves. And that comes through teachings from men and women who spend their whole life. Somebody said to me recently, well, how do you know that His Holiness Dalai Lama knows more than you do? And I said, well, I don't meditate 6 hours a day and pray for 2 hours, number one. When His Holiness is meditating, I'm probably watching MSNBC. So there you go.
Oh,
The
God,
people who have spent their lives in the science of mind and the science of heart.
yeah.
Sri Yukteswar's great book, The Science of Mind, which I highly recommend to everyone, really straightens some of this stuff out. Like, why do we think the way we do, and what comes at us in our present incarnation to help us get through these dark times. And as Raghu, as you just said, it's inexplicable how people can be so cruel. And let's just dispense with the idea of it's not a question of partisan thing, really. It's not saying you're wrong, I'm right. That's not where it's at. It's just we happen to live in a time when there's war and terrible iniquities around the world, and women and people of color and LGBTQ people are still suffering from the enormously selfish and cruel slights of their opposition. And what we can do a little bit today, and what I know Raghu's foundation, Be Here Now Foundation, does all the time, is try and get to the individual heart, the knower of all things. And when the knower knows, some of these things can be tackled without tremendous either depression or anger, neither of which help. And yet, I've been very angry since who became president in 2016, that such a liar and a clear charlatan and worse could lead a country of such power, and with a history starting with at least the promise of equality and brotherhood and sisterhood. How could it possibly have happened? And what can we do now? And as you said, yeah, if Kamala and Mr. Wells get elected, that'll be better.
Yeah.
There's no question it can't be worse. But as you said, Raghu, there's so much on the planet, particularly in terms of climate, access to water, just that alone. I remember when I was in Israel, one of the most sort of dominant conversations was about the fight for water between Israel and Jordan. Now, who talks about that on American television? No one, ever. We talk about whether someone made a mistake in a speech, or whether someone's no longer using makeup that was 2 days ago, or whether the vice presidential candidate used eyeliner. This is absolutely despicable. I have no two ways about it. It's just tabloid TV, tabloid thought, lack of thought, and not the good lack of thought, the bad lack of empathetic and compassionate thought. And it isn't covered. So what can we do? And as you said, Raghu, we've come into contact with great fortune, really, isn't it? It's just such one has to be so full of gratitude. Yeah. Because you see so many people struggling who do not have this thing to fall back on or fall forward with, and the very fact that you said once, Raghu, I'll never forget it, and I quoted you to other people, that this world is so weird and difficult to deal with sometimes, that all the Tibetan masters that managed to get out of Tibet when the Chinese invaded became our teachers. And how lucky are we? And how unlucky were the people of Tibet whose core values were attacked. Monks, nuns. Raghu and I were involved with a film some years ago, Cry the Snow Line.
Tibet, Cry the Snow Line.
Amazing film. And, when you see the actual footage of the way nuns and monks were treated by Chinese soldiers, there you have it. Beautiful, intense, wise incarnations of great value being abused by thugs.
Totalitarian regime.
Yeah. So what we talked about before this was who are the people, what are the things, what do they say, how do they ameliorate your immediate condition, rather than some academic backwards and forwards about philosophy. How does reading a great Dzogchen master or any kind of master, or meeting them and having that darshan, how does it influence and change the present moment when you're not with that person, you're not reading that book, you're not there, you're at home, you're seeing some atrocity on the news, and yet you're sitting in a nice apartment somewhere, a nice house, and go out to the garden and weed, or drive the car to the shore and look at the ocean. We're not immediately, we know that possibly billions of people are in great torment now. So that's what we're going to try and tackle, we two little guys.
Okay, that makes it big, very big.
Yeah, maybe too big.
A little too. Hopefully, we can be just a drop, even just a drop in the ocean of more awareness. Will be great. Here, I said mostly we were going to talk about our Tibetan teachers, really. And then I saw this quote, David. I don't even, verify it. Today is so crazy. I know many people quote Neem Karoli Baba, and I know he never, being there and hearing the syntax of how he talked and so on, it would never happen. And they clean it up and, they put in their own thing. So it's sometimes hard to tell, but I love this. And he said, this is Shirdi Sai Baba, life is a dream. Realize it. Life is a sacrifice. Offer it. Life is love. Enjoy it. Love one another and help others to rise to the higher levels simply by pouring out love. So this is coming from, we very much feel that there's no difference at all between a Shirdi Sai Baba and a Neem Karoli Baba and a Karmapa 16th in particular and others. But the beauty is, yes, they're not, there's not tombs of books just expanding on their philosophy. Nothing. It's just simplicity galore, and this was, this is alone enough to create a perspective, a perch from which we can see our lives in a little bit differently. So, Dave, the first reference. I mean, to me, he's the most known in the world. He has, to me, done just extraordinary things over his many decades of teaching and being. And of course, I'm talking about His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. Because to me, one of the first things that we need to engage with is compassion and kindness. And nobody exemplifies that more than him. And I wanted to there's a couple of things that just point to the extraordinary being, that he is. And so let me read something. This is a story, so I thought that'd be cool. It's a great story. There's a man named Richard Moore from Ireland, and he got, as I think 10-year-old, got hit by rubber bullets, in all of that sectarian war that was going on, and he went blind. 10-year-old.
Yeah.
So here's what His Holiness said. He was shot when very small and now cannot see. I doubt, and he said, Richard Moore is always calm, happy, and full of spirit. I doubt if the same sort of tragedy happened to me, whether I act like him or not. I don't know. In his case, he actually experimented. He practiced forgiveness. In my case, I have not experimented, meaning that he has not had that kind of extraordinary trauma. And I mean, I don't know how he doesn't count having to escape through the mountains, to get out of Tibet, but that's him. So Dalai Lama turned to him and he said, what kind of relationship did you have with your mother? He said, very warm, very close feeling. I think that's one major factor that he became a more compassionate person. When that unexpected tragedy happened, his response was more calm, not anger, not hatred. He's never allowed bitterness to stunt his positive attitude. So they were at a talk. So Moore and the Dalai Lama were sitting next to each other, and he was relating his story and so on the small stage, holding hands. If you've ever seen him in a video or been with him, he just is so warm and affectionate to everybody. It's amazing. The Tibetan leader did not relinquish his grip, even when he leaned forward to emphasize a point. And Dalai Lama said, when I first met him, he told me that after his eyesight was gone, he was now feeling, he was feeling bad. He had no more opportunity to see his mother's face. Just think of that. And His Holiness said, very touching. This shows his very close feeling with his mother. This also demonstrates his strong sense of human affection, which he got from his mother. Dalai Lama turned and looked at Moore again. He let go the blind man's hand, stood up, and moved his chair closest to him. Then he reached out and grabbed his hands again. And then Dalai Lama said, so now I want to tell you. This morning, his wife and 2 daughters came together to see me. So I teased him. Because of his peace of mind, he met a beautiful wife. He cannot see the face of the wife, but I can see. Very beautiful. And his 2 daughters, very attractive. He cannot enjoy that, but I can. The room erupted in laughter. So therefore I told his daughters, the Dalai Lama said, that they should carry their father's spirit, his practice of forgiveness on the basis of compassion, not only for their generation, but also the next generation. Their children and their children's children should carry their father's, their grandfather's spirit. I expressed to them this morning just like that. Richard Moore is my hero. Whether he believes it or not, I don't know. And then Richard Moore replied instantly, if you say it, I believe it. How beautiful is that? I mean,
that's extraordinary, incredible.
And just the
no matter what he says, like when you tell me you were going to do, I didn't know that quote, but you said you were going to do it. I found, well, I didn't find, I look at it every day, but here's a book. Okay, this book, the
Path to Tranquility.
The Path to Tranquility, and it's every day.
Oh, there's something. Oh, really?
So I thought, just because I do believe that randomly he never says anything that hasn't got depth and compassion. What would he say today? So I'll read it to you. Ties in with too. He says today, August 10th, true practitioners are unaffected by external pressures and their own emotions. They are free to secure the temporary and ultimate benefit of both themselves and others. They remain independent, fear nothing, and are never at odds with themselves, always peaceful, they are friendly with all, and everything they say is helpful. Wherever we go, let us be humble and avoid being noisy or bossy. Let us not hurt other people's feelings. Let's not hurt other people's feelings or cause them to act negatively. And within that, and within what you quoted, you can get a feel for this amazing being, I only met him once. I saw him many times, but I only actually was in a room with him once. And before I walked in the room, we sort of there were about 25 people, and there was a monk, one of his people, and before he went in, he said to me, and I think he said it to everyone, avoid shaking hands, just pranam, just do this. So I was very excited. I was excited as I could possibly be. And we walked in this little room somewhere, and I walked over to him, and it was my turn. And because I'm foolish, I just put up my hand to shake his hand, just like they told me not to. And it fits with your story because he grabbed it, and he didn't shirk or go, can't shake my hand. There's nothing further from his mind than that stuff, that kind of stuff that is around people of his stature. And he held onto my hand a little bit, and then I said, "I'm sorry for shaking your hand." And he said, "No, that was very nice."
You
very
said
nice. Yes, he did. It was very nice. And then I moved on because there was a queue behind me, and that darshan, that little moment, is so important to me because I met him and was this far away from him, and realized. Johnny Depp, the great Johnny Depp, somebody asked him one time, how did you learn to act? And he said, you can tell whether someone's acting correctly in a movie or anything. Look at their eyes. He said, all I do is look at people's eyes. When I'm acting with them, when I'm with them, whatever. Now, I know Johnny's had a few problems and some people have negative opinions about him. But when he said that, it seems like so obvious. But he said it with great depth, actually. Depth. He said, it's all in the eyes. It's all in the look in the eyes. And what you can see is yourself. You can see the grace that you are actually suffused with, but it's much easier to see it in someone else. But if it's someone of amazing consciousness, amazing self-awareness, and amazing compassion, when I looked into His Holiness's eyes, it literally changed my life in the way that Maharaji Ninkaroli changed yours and all our friends when the grace was there for you to be there. I felt that with him for just that moment, that he had wisdom and compassion. And those are the two basic feet, the 2 feet of Buddhism. There's a billion words just about a billion kinds of Buddhism. But every kind of Buddhism, from Dzogchen to Vajrayana to Mahayana to all of them, say you must have compassion with wisdom. Wisdom alone is virtually useless. Compassion alone is good, but sometimes it can lead you down strange roads if you're just not discriminating. So you have to have the two together. And that, my God, I mean, I get low like everyone else does, sometimes. And it's not always about the news. Sometimes it's just about getting older or, seeing too many doctors and so on and so forth, and all this shit that comes down on you when you turn older. And,
Yeah.
you get depressed about it. But then you realize every single person on the planet who's lucky enough to live to an age, goes through this stuff. And that's a part of the compassion, is understanding that you're not alone. Not in a selfish way, I'm not alone, so I'm fine. It's more like everybody goes through this, so I can't really complain.
Yeah.
The problem is, it lies in the stuff that we are virtually impotent to change. And those things are happening now. I saw a terrible film a couple of nights ago. Don't recommend it. It's called Reminisce. And it's
No.
with Hugh Jackman. And it's about the future in Miami, of all places. And I won't tell you about the story of the film because it's ridiculous. But there are many scenes in it when you see Miami in, like, whatever it is, looks like 2050, 2060, like that. And the buildings are half drowned in water. And the city is a nightmare, a dystopic nightmare. And more and more films are coming out on streaming, particularly, about these dystopic, apocalyptic things we sense around us.
That's right.
And that's a sign that at least the artistic community, even if it's the highly commercialized and manipulated Hollywood version, they're seeing it. So why doesn't everybody see it? I mean, I'll never forget it. In 1968, I was invited to a meeting at MIT in Boston about greenhouse gases. I thought it was going to be a meeting of 20 or 30 people. At that time, I was teaching at another university in Boston. They mainly invited academics.
Okay.
There were, I think, 2,000 people turned up. 2,000.
Wow.
And it was all about the climate deterioration caused by fossil fuels and by methane and industrial agriculture. And we all listened. I was in my 20s, and I thought, oh my God, these are all smart people. And here we are. What are we going to do? Well, it's only 60 years later, and half of America thinks it's a hoax.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about you, but the weather in the last 6 weeks in New York was just totally, absolutely abysmal. It just wasn't July, August. There was something in the air that made you feel bad. How do we deal with that, Raghu? I'm putting it to you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
How do we deal with such a massive literally earth-shaking problem? How do we remain equanimous when we know that certain things are being ignored that cannot be ignored?
Well,
sorry about that.
That you really pitched over.
I'm sorry. I need
sinking
your
slider or something, whatever they call it. I have to go in terms of one of our greats is Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche.
Yeah.
Who absolutely, for me, defines taking this wisdom, this Buddhist wisdom, and putting it into a vernacular that we can connect with. We in the West, and we who, all of us are, struggling in the area that you just referred to. So here's a couple of things from him. When we talk about spiritual advancement or development, we are not talking about expanding ourselves or becoming more professional. We are talking about unknowing and undoing. One of the problems in the spiritual materialistic approach is that as we begin to learn more, we add more tricks and trips of all kinds, more gadgets. The American society already has enough gadgets and tricks, but we want to add more because they seem to be fascinating and efficient ways to run our quote-unquote scenes, household, business, whatever. But in the long run, this creates further chaos and more garbage. This is precisely why we need to be aware of spiritual materialism, because when we create more tricks and trips in our lives, we are creating all kinds of garbage. Some of the tricks are fantastic, outrageous, and one might wonder who even dreamt these things up. One feels dwarfed by such wisdom. However, it's just more stuff. It's garbage. It's something that's being imposed upon us, which has nothing to do with unlearning, undoing, or simplifying. It's all piling up, boxes on boxes. We buy this stuff and we save the cardboard boxes until finally our garage is completely filled with boxes. Boxes and boxes with labels on them. And then he says, and this is the key to what your question. I mean, so Trungpa has a way of just, busting it all. It's necessary to meditate. Well, first he says the kind of simplicity that he's talking about can only come about through the practice of meditation, which deals with the plane of consciousness called the fifth skandha. Before we start the practice of meditation, we must have some understanding of what we're doing. It's not necessarily a scholarly one, and it's not evangelical in the sense that you are converted and feel good about it. We just need to have a sense of why are we practicing meditation? Why on earth would we meditate? Couldn't we do carpentry, paint pictures, hike, or take a trip around the world? What's the difference between those activities and meditating? They're all legitimate. And this is the key. It's necessary to meditate because otherwise, whatever we do will be pure deception. We would be convincing ourselves that we can maintain the territory of ego. If we are on the spiritual path, we must sit and meditate on our square cushions. We actually have to do it. We can't substitute walking in the woods, swimming across the ocean, or skydiving. Maybe those activities are somewhat meditative, but they are not quite powerful, honest, or genuine enough. We have to sit down with ourselves. You hear people say, "I'd like to have a word with you." A parent might say to their child, "John, can you come in my study? I'd like to have a word with you." Can we sit down some time together and have a talk? That's the kind of approach we need. We have to sit down with ourselves and find out who we are, what we are, and why we are. We have to realize that our basic approach to life has been self-oriented and territory-oriented. We cannot maintain our territory as far as spiritual experience is concerned. We have to learn to accept that. That is the most, God, how do I say it? Absolutely direct and simple, to me, understanding of certainly meditative process. Getting to know yourself. I mean, I always think of this, and then this morning I was like tired and sleep well, whatever. And then I realized, well, this is perfect opportunity to get to know myself and move more behind, the crosstalk that we have. Absolutely 100%. This is a starting point. And hopefully some kind of response to what the hell can we do? We are overwhelmed in so many different ways. This, everybody, is the first thing to do. And many people will say, well, I find it difficult. I can't really, my mind wanders. I can't really meditate. No, it's called practice. You start with 3 minutes and you go to 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever. And you do it because this overwhelm is absolutely untenable for us without some practice, And then when we talk about, just one more thing. When we talk about, what are you going to do? Sit around and, not do anything about what's going on in this world? I mean, here's what His Holiness has to say about that. And again, it goes back to compassion. He said, it's not enough to be compassionate. You must act. There are two aspects to action. One is to overcome the distortions and afflictions of your own mind, that is, in terms of calming and eventually dispelling anger. How do you do that? back to Trungpa and what he says about getting to know ourselves through meditation. This is action out of compassion. So the very first thing is compassion for ourselves to basically straighten out, right? The other is more social, more public. When something needs to be done in the world to rectify the wrongs, if one is really concerned with benefiting others, one needs to be engaged and involved. And I think that's the truest definition of, and it's what Ram Dass used to say forever, right? You clean up our hearts and then we can radiate love. And
Yes.
this is basically saying the same thing. And engagement, by the way, doesn't mean you're out there, yelling epithets at rallies. It's about it could be, it's what we're doing, David and I, right now, talking about how do we deal with this stuff? How do we get more knowing who we are? How do we become more compassionate? How do we become kinder, So I think that's at least the start of a response. What do we do in this overwhelming world?
Well, that's a very deep response. A great one, I mean, I underlined something here on my notes. This is breaking the microphone. Sorry about that. This is by Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, one of the great Dzogchen Buddhist masters.
I think he was His Holiness's meditation teacher too, way back.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've been, reading his books for years and also listening to his marvelous sons. He has 4 sons, all of whom are amazing also. But he said a little thing here which relates to what we're saying here. I underlined it. It says, we may be living in a dark age, but we still have the ability to recognize our own nature. What the age of listen to this, when the age of degeneration is rampant, the Vajrayana teachings will spread like wildfire.
Wow.
And I mean, you don't have to know what the Vajrayana teachings are. I don't fully know. But I think what he's suggesting there is parallel with what Raghu just read and spoke about, which is that you only have really control over who you are in the sense that you have free will. That's the gift of the universe. Otherwise, the whole thing would be a bunch of puppets and unhappy puppets. So here we are. We're still puppets to some extent because we listen to the puppet masters and we try and do what they suggest. We try. But I think what Urgyen was saying was, yes, it is a dark age. He died in 1996. And so he was born in the 20s. So he experienced World War II and just about missed World War I. I was very aware of how messed up the world was and how much killing was going on, totally unnecessary massacres and bombings and so forth. And yet he said, just being upset about it or even joining an army to fight it, is not the core of it. And it's as Trungpa said, and as he says, and as all the great Buddhist masters say, and all the great masters say, you don't have to be Buddhist, obviously, say in that dark time, it's like having a dark time in your family. When somebody argues with you and you can't talk to them anymore, a cousin, a nephew, a brother, whoever. But then if you have equanimity and you do practice, it comes pretty easy if you've done this with repetition and with sincerity and just done it. It becomes easier to be able to say, okay, it is a dark time. Horrible things are happening, but they're not happening to me right now. That sounds awful, doesn't it? Like, well, it's not happening to me, so it's okay. No, it's not okay. To act is to impact somehow the general atmosphere of consciousness on the planet. And you cannot do that when you're angry. I'm talking like a hypocrite here because I'm very capable of being extremely angry about certain things. And talk about Trungpa. Well, you got Trungpa on one side, you got Trump on the other. And I hate to even use his name on such a sweet thing as a podcast with Raghu, but I we know this. Everybody knows who's got a pulse and hasn't been indoctrinated. And now somebody wrote to me this week and gave me 5 reasons why people would vote for Trump. And is that a sign? And one of them was, deep deep unhappiness with their family's condition.
Mm.
Americans expect to be middle class in wealth and in access, and they're not at this point. And it's nothing compared with India or Malaysia or Sudan. It's nothing compared with that, or Russia. But it nevertheless is a thing that people in America can remember a time when they could afford to put a mortgage down and they could afford to buy decent cars and all those things.
Mm.
And in the last, God knows how many years, basically since COVID and since all of this has been going on, people feel deprived and angry. And you can sort of understand that. But then if you think of classic cults, Charles Manson, James Jones, all these people who managed to get people in a room and convince them that doing bad things was good for them. And the only way to counter that is by inquiring into one, as Organ says, is to find your own nature. Now, our great friend Krishna Das does seminars frequently, and I highly recommend looking at the transcripts of them. And even though we both know him so well and love him, obviously, and admire his incredible skills, he's the best at telling people what to do when this stuff happens. He says just one word: practice.
Mm.
And he's not being sort of, a know-it-all about it, or saying, I practice all the time, so I feel fine. He's not saying that. He's talking about kirtan, but he's not only talking about kirtan. He's talking about practice. And, I've found since I started meditating for real, rather than just talking about it, that it gets easier. I assure you, those of you that do not meditate, as you said, Raghu, most people say, well, my mind wanders. Yes. Well, look at that. I had a teacher once called Peter Resnick, who's a brilliant psychoanalyst and a marvelous man, lives in New York, still going. And he talks about dealing with what he calls the debater in your system. He says, how do you deal with this thing that comes up in your mind? It's all fucked. The world is messed up. I don't have a girlfriend or a boyfriend. My house has got leaks. And he says, that's the debater debating with you. What do you do with the debater? What do you do with that? It's you, but it's something in you that's talking to you and making you feel sad or worse. And he has methods, which is, you just talk to them you talk to that talk. You just look at it and you don't frighten it away. You don't try and begrudge it. You don't try and not think it. You just go, okay, I heard you. And then his next stage is you imagine that debater who's debating evil things at you and great depressive things. You imagine its shape, because to him it's an it. And then you imagine a toilet. And then you imagine that particular brand of expression, and you flush it down the toilet, and you actually do it with an old-fashioned move, the thing you used to pull. I remember these things. You pulled the toilet. The thing was up there, and you pulled it, and they went down into the sewage. And Resnick was saying, if you do this sufficiently number of times without anger, you begin to be able to deal with the evil, the dark, the misbegotten in your own life and in life in general. In other words, you're tackling the debater who is not you, but is caused by environmental and all kinds of words that come into your brain, and then the thought forms come, and the thought forms dominate your behavior and your mood. He's saying, get rid of it, but don't get rid of it by trying to avoid it. Stare it in the eye, look at it, befriend it, say, hi, how you doing? Go away, I heard you, just leave. And then if you don't, that doesn't happen, there's a lavatory available.
Yeah.
It sounds stupid, but it works. It works because the brain is a slave. That's what the neurons are just doing what well, that's a whole other conversation. Who is directing the neurons? Who is saying this now? Is it David Silver, born long ago, looking at himself and Raghu on a screen? Or is it the real thing that's coming through you that you should pay attention to? Because it's certainly not the body and the sinews and the blood and even the brain's synaptic reality. It's none of those. It's the pure essence of nature, Buddhist nature, original mind. If you can do that, as Krishna Das says, if you can practice something which does that for you, you will find a way to deal with the dystopia. That doesn't mean when we were watching this lousy film the other night, we just said, or I did, can we just turn this off? It's just really depressing me. It's awful. And yet it was kind of a signpost to what could happen. But the thing is, right now, the way to deal with it is not by anger or even, angry activism. That just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I mean, right now there's tons of protests going on all over the place, and some of them are valid, and some of them are peaceful, and therefore effective, I think. But the ones that are turned into hatred and violence, even the attempt of assassination of a bad dude, that's clearly not what we want.
Yeah.
And so, as you said, meditation helps you climb that stairway to self-knowledge and self-awareness. And it begins to be second nature, not Buddha nature, but second nature. Yeah. And when that happens, the darkness that surrounds us, there's light in it, at least for you at that moment, to emanate to whomever you see or want to be with or talk to.
And that's the compassionate action that His Holiness was talking about. So when we started this whole podcast, and I mentioned, so emblematic is compassion for His Holiness and kindness. Of course, he often repeats, kindness is my only religion. So I actually, David, some time ago, I don't even remember, so many podcasts, there's a woman named Amanda Gilbert who wrote a book about kindness. And there's this wonderful quote. So it's another, we're talking about practice, we're talking about getting to know oneself through meditation, allowing the grace of change to happen to us as individuals that can then radiate that out, even if it's just two people that you happen to bump into in over a year. It doesn't matter. This is what, and you're talking about just now, basically what she calls unwanted guests, dark thoughts, in the kind of self-interest that we recognize in ourselves, which can be really depressing, right? It's why Duncan Trussell and I put that book together, The Movie of Me, the audio book, The Movie of Me to the Movie of We, was to demonstrate that kind of how do we, transform self-interest, basically. She said, the moment I began to welcome my unwanted guests with kindness, sending loving kindness toward each thought, feeling, and corner of sadness in my heart, is when I felt the first taste of real healing in my life. Meeting what is present, which is what you were just speaking to, meeting what is present with kindness teaches us the profound lesson of letting go into our human experience, even into all of the unwanted stuff. Ultimately, it gives us the resources of compassion, big-heartedness, and I will include here warm-heartedness, which His Holiness espouses all the time, and keyword, inclusivity. So much so that I've come to call self-kindness a practice of radical inclusion. That's pretty great, right?
Yes.
Very great.
That's very,
great.
very crucial too, because that connects you from just being a selfish, happy person or even a selfish, conscious person to being an inclusive person, then proceeding towards the concept of bodhisattva, which, for those that haven't studied that, the bodhisattva is a person of total realization and liberation, a master, and then instead of just disappearing into the ultimate essence of life throughout the universe, decides, I'm coming back. I'm not just going to die and be happy. I'm going to come back as another person to do this again, because the world is still full of misconceptions and ignorance. And that concept of the bodhisattva obviously just does not only apply to Buddhist practitioners. We know people, we've all met people, thank God, who are just have that grace. They have that grace. And when you can recognize it, I'll give you an example. I hope I haven't brought this up before. Don't want to be a bore. But some years ago, my cable system completely broke. And it was one of those moments when you have to get the cable guy, and hopefully it's not Jim Carrey. And I waited, and they came on time, which is rare. And it was a young man called Jose, and he had an intern or someone learning with him. So he brought a young African-American man called Freddie along with him. And I didn't know. I opened the door, and there were the two of them, one Puerto Rican, one American. And they came in. And before I could say anything, Jose had looked at the bookcase that's sort of near my door, and he said, "Hey, mister, you like Yogananda?" I said, "I love Yogananda." "Why do you ask?" He said, "I love him too." And then he turned to Freddie, who knew not this fact. I did not know and he quickly explained to him why he loved Yogananda. So they fixed the cable thing in about 8 minutes. It was just a coaxial cable that had come off of something. And then we spent the next almost 3 hours, both here and down in the Optimum van. I followed him down. I just couldn't get enough of this guy. Because there he was in one of those uniforms that sometimes they wear, it's sort of like a blue-gray color, you can imagine. It's not an attractive looking thing, but they wear it, And I talked to them extensively about spiritual awareness. And I found that this young man, who was just a cable guy. That's right. That's what people would say. And he was completely able to have a fantastic conversation with me about it, because he clearly read Autobiography of a Yogi and was deeply impressed by it. Now, here's a guy this is part of a group that's now being called, rapists and murderers and all of that by certain people. And coming into contact with an immigrant, I'm an immigrant too, and seeing that individually there are people everywhere who are growing about that and within the darkness. And that's what Tulku Orgyen Rinpoche is talking about, that it's just as dark for Jose as it is for me, and probably worse, because of the way many immigrants have to live in this country. But it's there. That little diamond is there in many people that you pass in the street, but you don't know, you never will know. But you must assume that if you bring that up in a conversation or in some kind of exchange, it will have a good effect. Now, the Meher Baba said that nothing was worth doing unless there was spiritual readiness. I only know this because he told Peter Townsend this, and I was a big Who fan. And Townsend talked extensively about it in an interview about when he met Meher. Meher Baba said something to him like, "Mr. Townsend, you seem ready to listen to this." And of course, Townsend, who's a great intellect actually, and an amazing person besides being a marvelous guitarist, he just was swept up in it. And he still is, 50 years later, completely so. And my experience with Jose, the cable guy, taught me a big lesson. That you can't even begin to imagine what goes on in someone else's brain. But if you assume that they have the Buddha nature, they have kindness. I mean, this guy wasn't bringing it up to show how smart he was. He brought it up because he wanted some kind of camaraderie, apart from being a guy that comes to mend a coaxial cable. This was about 10 years ago. I think about this guy all the time. I really do. Because, I learned from him when he was talking about Yogananda. He remembered everything from Autobiography. I don't remember anything. My brain doesn't remember anything. He remembered tons of stuff and was quoting it at me without the book. So, I hope this doesn't sound like a patronizing or condescending memory, because it isn't. What it was for me was just a great love for mankind suddenly. That, okay, we're okay. We're okay. We have this capacity, all of us. And another thing that the Buddhists say, particularly the Dzogchen masters, is that we all have it absolutely all the time, no matter what kind of miserable life we might think we're living. That the Buddha nature is there right next to us. And it's so simple, the realization of that it seems impossible. That in other words, everyday mundane life contains the Diamond Sutra. Really? Really? Getting on a wet platform and then getting into a hot subway and coming out into a vastly overpopulated city and the weather's terrible. Is that Buddha nature? Yes, it is. And that's what the Buddhist masters keep saying, is that resource should be taught simply to everyone, and not have to read 10 or 45,000 sutras. They're all great, but do you need that? No. You just have to realize it's right next to you. This force, this essence of the universe, which is guiding your every move. Because, as he says, Ergen says, the eyes don't see, the ears don't hear, the nose doesn't smell. You take that spirit out of them, they're all as of a corpse. They stop. So what is it that smells? What is it that sees? Who is it that sees?
The age-old question.
The age-old thing. God.
By the way, everybody, this is David talks about this experience with the cable guy, and then talks about we're talking about Pete Townsend. You knew Pete too.
I didn't know. I wrote the biggest review that was ever in Rolling Stone. It was a full-page review of his solo spiritual album called "Who Came First," and it's about who came first, and it's about Meher Baba.
Oh wow.
And, I didn't know Peter Townsend. He did send a message to me eventually that he loved the review. It was a good review, but I never met him. No.
I just like the juxtaposition of the cable guy and then Peter Townsend and Meher Baba is what I love.
Me too.
And I'm going to say that, David has a book. By the way, you all can refer to past Mindrollings. There's a couple of them where David tells some of these kind of stories in this wonderful new book that he's hopefully finishing as soon as possible. And getting out there, because they're just extraordinary examples of all sorts of different human qualities that express compassion, express kindness, all the way to macabre kind of things with the Libyan guy, Omar Gaddafi, called David one day. You can hear about that. Just check those other podcasts out. I'm not going to go into it.
He didn't mean to talk to me, but a person was at the time, and he thought he was calling that person's direct number. And when I asked him who he was, he wouldn't tell me. And it lasted quite a while before I would say, well, I can't give him a message, sir, if you don't tell me who you are. And then he very reluctantly said, my name is Muammar Gaddafi. And I said, Colonel Gaddafi from Libya? Yes.
I love it.
Like in that kind of voice. Yes. I said, okay, I'll give him the message.
That's so great. Yeah.
Whoa. I mean, I knew he was, not an American, but that was about it. But, that hardly had that much to do with context, except that, now that you brought it up, why did he call? He called because my friend Earl lent him a tape of ska and reggae music, 5 tapes, actually. And he did it through a woman that Earl knew very well, who was a Bahrainian royalty who knew Gaddafi. And they were on a yacht together in the Mediterranean. And she gave him the tape, and he put it on all the speakers on the yacht. And it was people like Prince Buster and Big Youth and Bob Marley and, the original gangsters of reggae. And he loved it so much, but she wouldn't give him the tape because it was the only one she had. So he called me to ask him to send him a tape. Now, as bad as Gaddafi was, I give him a little bit for at least liking reggae. It's silly, really.
It's a crazy story. Absolutely crazy. You got to get this book out. That's all I got to say.
Would someone write it, please? I mean,
you've already written it so many times. Well, I want to close, Dave, with.
Well, no, there's more to say.
Well, we're going to have to do a part 2 on this. I mean, more to say. We could go on a weekly basis and bring up all these incredible people that have so much to give us in terms of one foot in front of the others walking through this.
Well, I mean, I must interrupt you here because I have these people that I've met. But every so often, Raghu will come up with something like, I'll say, well, this guy in the car, the 16th car mapping, I say, oh, I met him. Oh, really? Yeah. And then Ananda Mahima, who I adore and revere, I was talking to Raghu about this some years ago as if he needed to be talked about it. And he said, yeah, we met her. I think you were with KD and you walked over a hill or something, and there she was with a group of people chanting. I think that's the right.
No, it was with my father. My father, who came to India to see how my brother and I were doing in this whole.
Really?
Yeah, and we were in Benares, and she had an ashram there, and the boatman said, "Oh, there's Sananda Mahima's ashram." He said, "Take us there," and I had met her before, and we went up this gigantic staircase, part of the Ghats in Benares, above the Ganges River. And there was seemingly no one around, and we just wandered, my father, my brother, myself, and wife-to-be, Parvati, and we just wandered through, and because we heard some singing, and we just aimed towards it, and we ended up, can you imagine just walking down a hallway and looking into, a puja, a room with altar and so on, and there she was with just a couple of people singing Jai Bhagavan, which Krishnadas does many a time. Jaya Bhagavan, in the most sweet, incredible voice. So yeah, fortunate is not saying the reality of the grace of happening in her presence in that moment. Okay, I gotta move to this thing. Now, you have been quoting Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche.
Right.
And he had 4 sons. One who is not with us and wasn't well known, but Tsokni Rinpoche, Minggyur Rinpoche, and what's the other son?
There's Choki and there's
Choki Nima.
CK Chokling.
Chokling Nima. Yeah. Nima. Yeah. So absolutely extraordinary teachers, and they've spent so much time with us in the West. So this family is just wow, a big wow. They've given us so much. So this is actually a book that In Love with the World, and it's Mingyur Rinpoche, when he went over the wall of his ashram and monastery. He had a couple of them. I mean, he was a revered figure even when he was young. I mean, he did this in his early 40s or something.
Yes.
And he just, with nothing, and he went around for 3 years. He wanted to experience life without the trappings of being this incredible Lama. So he says, and this is the end of our beautiful podcast. I hope that people get a little bit of sustenance from it. I did, and I'm hoping you did as well. So he says, to make yourself a better person is to make the world a better place. Until we transform ourselves, we are like mobs of angry people screaming for peace. In order to move the world, we must be able to stand still in it. Now more than ever, I place my faith in Gandhi's approach. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Nothing is more essential for the 21st century and beyond than personal transformation. It's our only hope. Transforming ourselves is transforming the world. That is why I was on retreat, to more fully develop my capacities to introduce others to knowing their own wisdom and their own capacities for a peaceful life. That, I think, people say, well, okay, what's our purpose here in this life as individuals? I think that just properly describes it. I don't think that in any religion or any mystic tradition or anything, it does not matter. And that is the great teaching that I personally got when I first went back to India with Ram Dass. after he went back the second time. And the very first thing Neem Karoli Baba would say to us in those first few days, he'd point his finger and go, sub-ek, there is only one. There is only one thing going on. Buddha, Mohammed, Christ, all of the great beings that we are aware of, they only come from, there's one place that they are emanating from. And so I really feel grateful, a lot of gratitude towards these beings and how they have manifested themselves amongst us, even today. Particularly, of course, we talk about the Tibetans, but there's many others that aren't well known, that are connecting with us in a way that can really help us, again, put one foot in front of the others and navigate this very difficult world that we're in today.
Yes. You mentioned at the top of this Shirdi Sai Baba, and
Yeah.
for those who don't know anything about him, one simple thing. He never said whether he was a Hindu or a Muslim. The temple he lived in, he called a masjid, which is usually referring to an Islamic temple. And he refused ever to divide himself into one of those two things. And people used to get angry with him, in the little village of Shirdi and so forth. But he stuck to it, obviously. And he said, this is the beginning of this. You must understand these two disciplines, these two incredible, powerful spiritual paths are one and the same. And if you start to divide them up, that's the first mistake. So a simple thing like that, which was, in other words, any Muslim, any Hindu, or anybody could turn up at his place in Shirdi and get his blessing, if not more, his healing sometimes.
And he busted them, right? He'd take the Hindus into the masjids, and he'd take the Muslims into the Hindu temples. He'd force them. They were so wary of doing it. It was so inbred in them from centuries and centuries of division. He really, represented what do we do with polarization, and he was a master who, because of his mastery, allowed that to happen, allowed these people to drop these horrible projections of the other. With him, there was no other. And same with Neem Karoli Baba. They're very similar in that way. There was no other. Meeting him personally, in person, personally isn't the right word, in person, I was astounded by the fact that there was no two. There wasn't someone trying to figure me out to get to know me like you do when you meet with anybody that you've never met before. Nothing. Nothing. It was beyond the two. And that's a living example for us. And if we can just start with, I'll go back to Krishna's practice. Just a little, start somewhere. Or Trungpa Rinpoche. Somewhere, right. So somewhere, yeah.
I started doing 5-minute meditations years ago, and I felt like a fool. And people doing 8-hour ones somewhere. And I thought, what is this? And over the years, it just grew and got easier and easier and easier. And, maybe one of the final things you might say here is that no matter what small thing you decide to practice, it will ameliorate those times when you feel empty and lost. And that's the most important thing. We can communicate with each other, which is how do you actually help in this time? And I think it's a one-to-one, or it's one of those things that doesn't involve prime ministers, presidents, popes. It involves your own real nature, talking to someone else who has that exact same nature with a different pair of glasses on it. So
there you go. Here we are. We hope that, the people, we hope that everybody has a takeaway here from one of these incredible beings, or some of the comments here that we both made. But all of it will be available. These books that we've quoted from the people who do the show notes for Be Here Now Network, you'll be able to have links to be able to pick up some of these books. By the way, Dave, we didn't even get to Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. Because he's, boy, he's tough.
If you get into Dilgo, you will find that realization,
uncompromising.
Yes, and the way he communicates, what happened to me was it was like an arrow. It just shot into me, and I knew it.
No BS. You cannot BS anything around Dilgo Khyentse. I mean, not around any of these beings, but still.
Any of them, yes.
We'll do this again. We'll just create a part 2 of this, because I think it's really, it's helpful for me, and I'm thinking it's helpful for you just to go to these places and remind ourselves. Yeah. It's all about reminding ourselves. So you will be able to pick up all of this. Go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/mindrolling, and we will see you next week. And Dave, thanks for being. David's spending a little bit more time with me, with Mind. I mean, David and I started Mindrolling. For those of you who don't know, so I'm happy you're spending more time.
I love doing it, and I'll do it anytime you want to do it.
Okay, great. All right, everybody. Ram Ram. We'll see you next week.
Yes.